training exercise on the hottest day of the year. Corporal Joshua Hoole collapsed at an army centre in the Brecon Beacons. 3 SAS soldiers died of heat exhaustion in the same area 3 years ago.
It was a job he had to do, and he was a dedicated soldier. He died doing the job that he loved.
Also tonight, May meets Merkel as Britain's exit from the EU tops the agenda.
It's official, Trump is formally nominated as the Republican presidential candidate.
We're going to win the presidency and bring real change and leadership back to Washington.
And the Royal Marine, badly injured in Afghanistan, now heading to the Rio Paralympics.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Charlene White.
Good evening. A soldier has collapsed and died while on a gruelling training exercise in Brecon on the hottest day of the year so far. 26-year-old Corporal Joshua Hoole had just completed an 8-mile fitness test. 3 years ago, 3 SAS soldiers died from heat exhaustion after an exercise in the same Welsh mountain area.
Tonight, Corporal Hall's grandfather told ITV News he had just celebrated his birthday, was about to be his brother's best man and then get married himself. The Army has launched an investigation into his death. Our Wales correspondent Rupert Evelyn has the latest.
An experienced soldier pushing hard to better himself and improve his rank. At home, he and his fiancée were planning their wedding. Next week, Corporal Joshua Hoole on the left was due to be his brother Tyrone's best man. And now he is dead. His family are simultaneously proud of him and devastated by his loss.
Josh was 26, just on the 12th of July, and a good lad. I sadly missed, but it was a job he had to do, and he was a dedicated soldier. Served twice in Afghanistan and with the Special Wood Services in Iraq. He died doing the job that he loved.
That a soldier should once again die while training on the hottest day of the year raises serious questions. Precisely why Josh Hoole is dead is unknown. But when SAS reservists Corporal James Dunsby, Lance Corporal Edward Meyer and Lance Corporal Craig Roberts died on the hottest day of the year 3 years ago, the inquest found a catalogue of military failures in planning and preparation for heat-related illness. James Dunsby's father is afraid of history repeating itself.
I just hope it wasn't heat stress, because if it was, well, obviously lessons haven't been learned. It's a sorry day.
Unlike the reservists, Josh Hoole was not up here on the Brecon Beacons but at the barracks down the valley, although there are striking similarities in conditions that may form part of the investigation.
My heart goes out to his family and his friends. This is a tragedy. He was not involved in Special Forces selection. This was a training for a career course for him to be promoted. We're still investigating what took place, and we'll learn the lessons that come from that.
The MOD have been found in neglect in the Brecon Beacons before, and as such the phrase lessons learned may be tested with the death of Josh Hoole that has once again raised questions about soldiers in training. When the 3 SAS reservists died, the coroner found that the MOD was failing simply to follow its own standard operating procedures. The families found it difficult to get to the truth. The coming hours and days for Josh Hoole's family will be critical in establishing what went wrong, and they will rightly be expecting total transparency.
Thanks, Rupert.
Now, the 2 most powerful women in Europe are meeting right now in Berlin. Theresa May is paying her first visit as Prime Minister to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The relationship will be a critical one, of course, when formal negotiations begin to take Britain out of the EU. Well, our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is in Berlin. So, Chris, how are they getting on? They've both been speaking, I understand. What have they been saying?
Well, Mark, you might have heard Theresa May say several times since she became Prime Minister that Brexit means Brexit and Britain's going to make a success of it. Well, to be frank, if she's going to make a success of it, she will have to do so here in Berlin, and in particular with Angela Merkel, Europe's most powerful politician. Without her, not a lot happens in the EU. So no surprise that Theresa May came here first. The trouble is the Germans don't really know what Britain wants from Brexit. Basically because there isn't a plan, and nor is there any clarity on this controversial issue of free movement. Either Britain wants access to the single market and has to accept free movement, or it wants controls of free movement and therefore can't be in the single market. Well, this is what Theresa May said about free movement a few moments ago.
It's very clear to me that one of the messages that the British people gave in their vote that the UK should leave the European Union was that they wanted to see control brought into the movement of people from the European Union into the United Kingdom. And so that, of course, will be one of the issues that we will be looking at and that we, as a government, will deliver on for people.
Well, Angela Merkel said that, dealing with Britain in situations like this is nothing new. She said to us that it's always been rather arduous and an uphill battle dealing with the UK, but she said she did respect the British decision to leave the EU. But this wasn't really about detail. This was about these two women meeting because they've never really met before, and it was as much about relationships as it was about making any real progress.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Well, before flying to Berlin, Theresa May took her first Prime Minister's questions in the Commons. It was an assured performance, which obviously delighted Conservative MPs. Labour MPs, though, were less impressed with her repeated digs at Jeremy Corbyn, who she compared to an unscrupulous boss who wouldn't listen to his workers. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
Not for 26 years had a woman left through this famous door to face questions from MPs as Prime Minister. So the stakes were high. Mrs May loudly cheered as she entered the Commons, didn't disappoint.
Can I welcome the Right Honourable Member to her first Prime Minister's question time and congratulate her on her appointment and becoming the country's second woman Prime Minister.
In my years here in this House, I've long heard the Labour Party asking what the Conservative Party does for women. Well, just keeps making us Prime Minister.
But there was more, much more.
In her speech on the steps of Downing Street, she also addressed insecure workers, saying you have a job, but you don't always have job security.
I suspect that there are many members on the opposition benches who might be familiar with an unscrupulous boss. A boss who doesn't listen to his workers, a boss who requires some of his workers to double their workload. A boss, and maybe even a boss who exploits the rules to further his own career. Remind him of anybody?
It did in more than one way. Her words were directed at Jeremy Corbyn, but in her manner and demeanour, Mrs May appeared rather deliberately to be emulating Britain's first woman Prime Minister, Mrs Thatcher. And like her, she used every opportunity to turn her guns on Labour.
And can I wish her well in healing the country in the months and years to come? After all, it is she and her colleagues who have so bitterly divided it.
I have to say, which is the party that took 3 weeks to decide which should be their unity candidate? It was the Labour Party that was divided.
The unity candidate smiled ruefully. Job done, Mrs May sat down and sighed with relief. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
From next month, patients in England who haven't had any contact with their GP for 5 years will be dropped from their surgery. It's an efficiency measure, apparently. NHS England doesn't want to pay GPs for patients who have died or gone away.
But doctors' groups say it could penalise people for being healthy. Duncan Golestani reports.
At this surgery in Doncaster, the staff do everything they can to keep patient lists up to date. But with people moving in and out of the area, it's far from easy. The doctors here are concerned at plans to strike off patients who haven't been seen for 5 years.
My fears are that because of this new scheme, a large number of perfectly healthy patients will contact their GP practice needlessly so, just to remain upon the patient list.
Finances are tight. Can you not understand the NHS wanting to tidy up those lists?
We depend upon healthy patients not seeing GPs to be able to fund the care for those sick patients who desperately need to see the GP very frequently. If we were to lose that funding, we would lose resources with which to look after sick people, and we probably wouldn't be able to deliver a service.
Patients who have not been in touch with their GP in the past 5 years will be written to twice to check their address and registration details. If they don't reply within 6 months, they could be removed from the practice list.
I think it's fair, because there's other people wanting to be on lists and stuff that need doctors. So if you don't need them, there's no point.
I think it's stupid, to be honest, because nobody knows when they're going to get ill, do they? Do you know what I mean? You could get a healthy person that don't have to go to doctors for a long time, then all of a sudden come ill. You don't know, do you?
There are nearly 3 million so-called ghost patients in England for which surgeries receive around £100 a year, but doctors are worried certain groups will be unfairly affected by the new system.
There is real concern that patients in deprived areas who are vulnerable, or maybe lead chaotic lifestyles, or whose first language is not English, may not respond to letters that are sent to them by the NHS because they don't believe that they are important.
The changes will not affect Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. Defending the system, NHS England says accurate lists are important for many reasons, not least getting public money to where it is needed most. Duncan Golestani, ITV News, Doncaster.
Still to come in the ITV Evening News.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
Donald Trump's family lead the celebrations as he's formally nominated as the Republican candidate.
And a big job for Big Sam. Allardyce set to become the New England football manager in the next 24 hours. Those stories and more right after the break.
Welcome back. 18 months ago, the world assumed it could never happen, but Donald Trump has officially won the Republican nomination for US president. It was announced at a raucous convention which featured his children in prominent roles. And after the votes from each state were counted, the party immediately took aim at Hillary Clinton, with some activists demanding she go to prison. Our correspondents wrote more reports from the convention in Cleveland.
The great state of Alabama,
Arizona,
Mississippi,
Maryland, California!
This was much more than political theatre. It was also confirmation of the most astonishing outcome in presidential politics for decades.
89 delegates!
It was the New York delegation that put Trump over the required threshold.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
Trump's son completed the roll call that a year ago would have been unimaginable. And it felt like an American dynasty was born here. Not only was Donald Trump beamed in by video link to accept the prize,
we're going to win the presidency and bring real change and leadership back to Washington.
But then his daughter took to the stage.
In person, my father is so friendly, so considerate, so funny, and so real.
And then it was the turn of Donald Trump Jr., declaring that his father would change America.
And when we elect him, we'll have done all that. We'll have made America great again, greater than ever before.
2 votes abstain.
But you could find among delegations on the floor pockets not just of anger, but frankly, of moral despair.
It's an embarrassment. I feel embarrassed to be an American right now. I've never said that before in my life.
Anti-Trump forces haven't just lost, they've been crushed.
So the insurrection is over. Donald Trump has seized control and in the process changed the direction and the very character of one of America's great political parties.
In Libya and Nigeria, guilty.
Republicans are in a vindictive mood. The governor of New Jersey, a former prosecutor, conducting a mock trial of Hillary Clinton.
Is Hillary Clinton guilty or not guilty?
It wasn't just that the delegates shouted guilty. These are Americans demanding a political opponent is put behind bars. Lock her up, they chanted. This is a party changing its very identity before our eyes. Robert Moore, ITV News, Cleveland.
Now, some breaking sports news. Sunderland manager Sam Allardyce is expected to be appointed as the new England manager in the next 24 hours. Roy Hodgson, of course, stepped down from the job after a disappointing Euro 2016 championships. Well, Richard Pallow is here. Richard, sticking with an English manager, how much of a surprise is this?
Well, I don't think it's much of a surprise because the bookmakers have had him as favourite for quite a while. I think to many England fans tonight it will be a bit of a disappointment because if I described Allardyce's style of management as pragmatic rather than exhilarating, it might give you an inkling of why some football fans will not be too happy with this. Now, the FA have been indicating for a while that they've wanted an Englishman, even after what happened with Roy Hodgson, and Allardyce was the first to be interviewed. It seems he's now got the job and perhaps ruled that desire to want an Englishman ruled out the likes of Jurgen Klinsmann, the German, who perhaps might have been better, or Gus Hiddink. Now, there was a panel who the FA looked at, former players who said, what do the players need now? They said they need resilience under pressure going forward. Allardyce's sides have that in spades. They have defensive resilience. It helped keep Sunderland up, of course, last season. Now they've got to try and pick England up. They have to do it pretty quickly. There's a match within about 6 weeks, and then the World Cup qualifiers start very soon after that.
All right, so maybe Sam is the man. Thanks very much, Richard. Thanks.
The Paralympics team that will represent Great Britain in Rio this summer has just been finalised. And this includes a former Royal Marine who lost both his legs as a teenager in Afghanistan. ITV News has been following Joe Townsend's journey since what he calls his darkest days when he felt lost. But he says striving to make Team GB has turned his entire life around. Paul Davis spoke to him exclusively after he heard the good news.
You're allowed to smile when you've just learned that years of punishing work has been rewarded with a place on the plane to Rio. All these athletes have fought personal battles to become Paralympians. Joe Townsend's story is one of many, but it is absolutely inspiring. Hard to believe it now, but after the cruelest battlefield injuries, there was a time he couldn't lift a toothbrush. That's when he began setting the targets that have brought him here.
Just small things like being able to feed myself 3 forkfuls of food before I became too tired to do it, or just hold a cup for myself, and just these really small goals. Essentially the goals got bigger and bigger, and finally set my sights on Rio and the Paralympic Games, and it's kind of, yeah, that's like the ultimate goal that I could set myself, and now I've got the opportunity to race there. The feeling of achievement's just absolutely amazing.
And no one will ever accuse Joe of going for an easy option. He'll represent Great Britain in the gruelling triathlon, in the pool, on the track in his racing wheelchair, and the cycle, regularly training abroad to sharpen his skills.
Using what happened to me as fuel, as the fire to push my sport and be able to push myself to the absolute limit it's helped me in a way, and I think that's why I'm here going to Rio now.
Joe was a 19-year-old Royal Marine Commando when he stepped on a mine in Afghanistan 8 years ago and lost the lower part of his body. ITV News has followed his progress from the time a Headley Court rehabilitation programme introduced him to sport. But his mother was with him through the darkest hours.
She literally did not leave my side from day one. Being called into intensive care in the middle of the night to say goodbye to me because they didn't think I was going to make it out of theatre, to now being absolutely elated that she's going to see her son representing her country.
I'm just so proud. If there was another word instead of proud, I'd use it, but I can't find one. I've even looked it up and I can't find another word. It's just amazing. But it is all down to that sheer determination and that will to succeed.
And that will means Joe isn't going to Rio just to make up the numbers.
How competitive do you believe you can be in the medal stakes?
I'm actually quite conveniently coming into the form of my life at the minute. The progress I've made in the sport in just even the last few weeks has been outstanding. I think if I can race as I have been in training and deliver what I know I can deliver, then yeah, I've got a good chance of getting on that podium. It's going to be exciting.
And if he needed any more incentive to push himself, those medals will be decided on his mum's birthday. Paul Davis, ITV News.
And finally, can you name the best football club in Gibraltar? Well, we can tell you who can. Fans of the Scottish champions Celtic. In just under an hour, Glasgow's professional players will face the mostly part-time Lincoln Red Imps.
Yes, believe it or not, Celtic lost the first leg 1-0 and are now in danger of an embarrassing exit from the Champions League. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports from Glasgow.
Lincoln Red Imps sounds like an amateur team from the East Midlands. But how much of a shock was it when these part-time minnows from Gibraltar beat Scottish giants Celtic? That reaction from the commentators just about says it all. The scorer for the Red Imps that night was Lee Casciaro. By day, he's a police officer. If you beat Celtic, what would that mean?
I work from Sunday to Wednesday, so the next qualifier is on Tuesday or Wednesday. So I just get back, ask for favours of mates and at work, and hopefully, if I can take the days off, I can. If not, I won't be able to go, realistically.
If you can't get time off work, you won't be able to play in a Champions League qualifier?
No.
The contrast between these two clubs is huge. The Imps' usual crowd is just 60. Celtic play in front of 60,000. The part-timers include a policeman and a customs officer in their team, while Celtic's record signing cost £6 million. Lee plays in the Imps team with his two brothers, and they've been given strict instructions for full time.
If we win, we can't swap shirts.
Because you won't have...
Because we won't have enough shirts for the next qualifier.
And if you lose?
And if we lose, we can swap them
and pay for the shirt.
Probably have to pay for the next shirt that's been done for us for the next season coming up.
You have to pay personally?
Yeah.
The Imps players went to see Celtic Stadium before tonight's match. You could fit the entire population of Gibraltar in here twice.
Come on, Lincoln Red Imps!
The tiny team from Gibraltar believe they can rock world football. Peter Smith, ITV News, Glasgow.
Great story. That's it for now. Tom will be here at 10.
Yes, but from everyone here on the team, have a very good evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.